The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch, copyright 2016, EMP 2023, all rights reserved. Chapter 11, Such Things as Trolls. Cursoon awoke, but when he opened his eyes, he wondered whether he had gone blind because he still saw only blackness. He found himself stretched out upon his back in putrid-smelling mud, and the deep impression in which he lay gave him the idea that he had landed with a great deal of force. Moreover, his whole body shivered violently from laying in the damp, cold muck for a prolonged period. Sitting up, he quietly felt around in the darkness with his benumbed fingers, but he found only more foul-smelling filth. Then, when something slimy scurried over one of his outstretched hands, he recoiled. Snatching them back, he quickly wiped them upon his tunic with a grimace of disgust. Slowly, as the fog of drowsiness began to clear from his mind, he recalled the memory of the stone that had sprouted thick bent legs and the foul face that had roared.
It was all just a dreadful nightmare,
he whispered, trying to convince himself.
I assure you, my sweet sleeping beauty, this ain't no dream.
A coarse, guttural voice called out in a tone that was obviously meant to ridicule. Whoever it was, they spoke the common tongue with little care for its proper pronunciation, and their voice sounded enormous due to its strange, throaty resonance. The suddenness of the spoken words startled Cursoon so that he yelped loudly and flinched in the darkness.
Ha! You're nothing but a scared little maggot.
The voice scoffed again.
But weren't yez bold enough when yez came tromping into my bog?
Frantically, the bard began again to feel about in the rotten-smelling mire. He hoped to come across one of his swords, or perhaps even a way of escape. He would have joyfully welcomed any comfort at that moment.
No need trying to escape now. I's caught yez like a pretty little bug, but I's hasn't quite made up my mind whether I's gonna just eat yez or take my time squishing yez to jelly.
The deep voice began to laugh cruelly, but the laugh slowly became a hoarse cough that the speaker fought to suppress. Staring into the blackness, Cursoon collected all his courage, and after a hard swallow, he began to ask to whom the voice belonged, but his own came out in a high-pitched squeak. In answer, there came a booming mixture of laughter and coughing. When the fit had passed, the voice returned deep and raspy.
Ha! You squeak like a little rat.
Cursoon swallowed again, and then restarted his question with such sudden boldness that he even surprised himself.
What sort of man are you that abducts a soul and then gloats over the evil he's done?
Ooh, so yez are bold, eh?
The voice said with a sneering tone.
But yez marked me all wrong.
What do you mean?
The bard asked while his heart quivered at the guess his mind was already making.
I's no man. I's called Bogra, but they's of your kind named me Baleful, and while I's at it, I's answer the question yez asked the frayful lil farmer.
Suddenly, a red flame flared up, flooding the cave with its light. This came from a strange torch which sprang to life like a match when it is struck. The torch's red light illuminated the darkness enough that Cursoon could see the same huge, ugly face from before. Again, it was bent toward him, and its gray, parched lips parted to show its jagged teeth as it formed the next sentence with sinister articulation.
There's still such things as trolls in the world.
With a start, Cursoon quickly slid backwards upon his backside in the mud until he found himself sitting against the cave's damp wall.
This can't be a troll.
The bard's mind screamed. He had always heard that trolls were a dim-witted race who spoke very few words. By all accounts, this troll seemed far too talkative. But then the voice of Guileless abruptly echoed within the bard's head.
Trollops are far worse than trolls.
As Cursoon shivered in the corner of the den with these thoughts swirling within his mind, The great trollop took the small torch and placed it into an ornately carved wooden rack which hung high upon the muddy wall. The sconce was of such a quality that Cure soon doubted it could have been made by the giantess. Instead, he was quite sure that the brutish woman had thieved it from some other poor, unsuspecting soul. Baleful turned back to the bard and asked with a jagged grin,
"Now, I's told yez my names. Yez gonna tell old Bugra what name ye's called by, eh? It'd be rude, not ta."
She was rather enjoying the plain expression of fear upon her victim's face.
My name is Cure Soon.
The bard stammered out before he could catch himself.
"And where'd yez say yez from?"
The trollop asked, with a sudden pleasantness that caught the other completely off guard. It was nowhere near a lovely tone when compared to other women, but for the giantess, it was a drastic change from her earlier manner.
I didn't.
The bard raised his chin in a sudden gesture of defiance. Baleful burst into a fit of thunderous laughter.
"Look at the lil lordling now, so noble."
Her words ended in a fit of raspy coughs. Cure soon frowned, but made no reply.
"There's no need telling me,"
the giantess admitted when her cough subsided. She then pointed at the shattered bits of his shield that were scattered around upon the floor of the cave. Most of its emblazoned colors could still be discerned through the mud that was smeared across its shards, but in the red light its blue field appeared to be black.
"I do 'pologize for busting your shield."
The giantess lowered her eyes in a false expression of remorse.
"I's got such an awful temper. It's just when I saw that coat of arms."
She caught herself with a cruel chuckle and then let the sentence die unfinished. Quickly returning to her fun, she declared,
"I's already know who yez are. Yah's the son of Acumen, Lord of Eagle's Peak."
Baleful said this in a voice that was meant to mimic Cure Soon's manner of speaking. A look of surprise flashed across the bard's bearded face, and this caused the trollop to burst into more coughing laughter.
How?
He caught himself when he realized his reaction only confirmed her guess. With a sickening feeling, he slumped back against the muddy wall. Baleful steepled her enormous fingers, set them against her wart-covered cheek, and blinked her huge black eyes to mimic a lovely expression.
"Oh, don't be so shocked. I's no soothsayer. I's listening when yez told that silly farmer yez lovely little story about your poor missing wife and children's."
A flash of rage shot through Cure Soon. Jumping to his feet, he pointed an accusing finger at his captor and slightly raised his voice.
You know, just because you're big enough to bully others, it doesn't mean you should.
"I's not always so big, and there's many that bullied me."
Baleful growled in a threatening tone that quickly cooled the bard's anger. After a moment of silence, Baleful thrust out her massive gray fist, causing Cure Soon to flinch. However, after only a chuckle, she slowly turned and opened her hand to reveal his now soiled but still colorful hat. The bard made no move to take it, and so Baleful plucked it from her palm and gently dropped it onto the bard's head. It landed askew, making him look slightly comical.
"I's used to listen to the lil lord's bard. He wore a kind o' odd hat, somethin' like yours,"
the trollop said with a cold sneer. Making herself comfortable, she suggested prettily,
"So, how's about yez give old Bugra a tail, and maybe, if I's like it, I's won't crush yez into jam."
Cure Soon took a deep breath, closed his blue eyes for a moment, and then let out a quivering sigh. When he opened his eyes again, a look of resolve had settled upon his face. Straightening his hat, he glared up at the giantess.
I only tell stories for payment,
he declared firmly.
"Well, let's see then. I's thinking about pulling off one of yar legs for a snack. How's if I's don't? Would that be payment enough?
She asked with a cruel sneer.
And what story would you have me tell?
The bard replied without skipping a beat. Chuckling, Baleful shrugged.
Old I's know what stories are rattling round in your pray lil head.
With a grumble of frustration, the bard sat down upon a large rock, put his elbows on his knees, rested his chin in his hands, and tried to think of a story. After a few moments, he began the first tale that came into his mind.
In the beginning, the King of Heaven sang the song of creation.
King of Heaven? I's don't want to hear none of that nonsense.
The giantess growled impatiently.
There ain't no fool kings up in the sky.
You don't believe in the King of Heaven?
Kursun was so stunned that he forgot his fear for a moment.
Why should I's?
The trollop scoffed.
He's never done nothing for me.
But
Kursun began to protest, but she interrupted.
Don't yez know any about trolls killing folks, or maybe one with loads of blood spilling?
Baleful's tone was lustful, and this caused Kursun's anxiety to quickly return. In that moment, the bard felt an urge to despise this beastly woman, but putting his feelings aside for the sake of his life, he quickly searched through his mind for a story about a troll. Kursun was struggling when he suddenly gasped.
oh,
The trollop's great black eyes gazed at him with a stare that seemed to pierce his very soul.
You do know one. I sees it by the look in your bright eyes.
The giantess laughed while fighting back a cough. The bard answered with apprehension.
I know only one, sir.
He caught himself.
I mean, madam.
He stammered for a second.
But I'm quite sure you wouldn't find it, entertaining.
How's about yez tell it and let old Bogra be the judge?
Baleful suggested as she settled back against the muddy cave's wall, making herself comfortable.
Very well, madam.
The bard conceded nervously.